Showtime, everybody. We are in our second live stream of the year. So, everybody, welcome to the Hashtag405 channel for our half 100 live stream. I'm your host, Emperor OU Flag Guy, until the end of Tuesday. I'm going to milk winning our fantasy league for as long as possible. So, until the end of Tuesday. Joined by tonight, Chad. Chad, how are you doing tonight? How did the holidays go? Do you still have your Christmas tree up?
Amanda is actually taking it down right now. I feel like I need to change my name. If you're Emperor OU Flag Guy for winning, I need to be like Dumpster Fire Chad for coming at the bottom.
Well, it wasn't really your fault that you came in the bottom with it. I mean, it's just stuff happened, and you lived with the meme team, dream team. For all of those who never watched any of our live streams on Tuesdays and stuff, Chad's a part of the league, and he went the full week 7 bye week, and it did not serve him well. He got last place, so
did not go well.
It did not go well for him, and you started off well. That's the funny part, and then it slowly started to tank on it. And I had to laugh because I messaged Frank to congratulate him that he won the consolation, so he gets the first pick, and he's like, "Josh, I got to admit something." I'm like, "What?" He's like, "I didn't set my lineup at all this week or the past couple of weeks. I just ended up winning." I'm like, "Hey, what matters is you won it in the end." He's like, "Hey, I'll take that." So I am still, as we speak, taking my Christmas tree down. Even though I am not Catholic, I do live by the 12 days of Christmas. So January 6th was that last day, and I always go by like the first weekend after that. So I've been taking my Christmas stuff down. I got everything down at the office, and now I'm just kind of working on stuff at the house at this point and putting it back into storage for another couple months at this point. So besides that, Chad, let's jump right in. Let's address the elephant in the room. How much is Bama going to win by tomorrow?
Probably 10, I would say. I would guess 10. It really just depends on how good you think the Georgia coaching staff is, or how much better Saban is than them. Because, they obviously have all the film because it's a rematch game.
Correct.
So if they can figure out where they went wrong during that SEC championship, then maybe they can, I don't know, pull something out of a hat. But it does not look good for college football if you do not want another Alabama national championship.
Well, here's my question to you. And viewers, by the way, throw your comments in. We'll definitely mention them during live stream. Who do you think is going to win, Bama or Georgia? Who do you want to win, though, is the question, Chad. Do you want Bama to win or do you want Georgia to win?
I want Georgia to win.
Really? I'm surprised on that. I'm legit surprised that you picked Georgia. Why?
It's a really dumb reason, so I really don't care, except I really like those SEC short videos.
No.
and they have the Hope girl, and I really want to see the video they put out if Hope doesn't betray Georgia in the end. And so really I'm just hoping for good content to come out of the Georgia win.
Oh goodness. I enjoy those too. Those are pretty funny. The Hope storyline has been fantastic. Absolutely funny. And they've been brutal on Georgia, but if I had to pick, man, and the giant meter is not an option, I gotta say Bama. And the sole reason is we're already in the Bama dynasty. What's more championship going to do at this point? What is one more going to add to this dynasty at this point? It's not going to really matter. If Georgia wins it, and it's with all due respect to the Georgia fan base, they are going to be one of the most obnoxious fan bases for the next year. And they already said when people were arriving in Indianapolis, they were already barking. And I'm like, nope, I got to take Bama on this one. As obnoxious as Bama has been and how much the dynasty, I have to take Georgia. So I don't want either to win. I'm tired of the Bama dynasty, but I don't want Georgia.
I think the most interesting storyline about Bama now is Saban is 70-something at this point and has coached or been the boss of a large portion of the top coaches in college football now.
Correct.
And so I think it's time to start thinking, who is Bama going to want to replace Saban? Like, which
That's
of
a good
these coach rehab coaches is going to be good enough to step in for Saban when he leaves?
My assumption has always been Dabo, since he is I think he was a graduate there. For it, my assumption is that it would be Dabo Sweeney. But if it's not him, that is a good question. Would it be Kirby Smart? Would it be one of the other former coaches at that point?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That is a good question. Now, keep in mind, I expect Bama and Saban to be together for the next 10 years. Like, I fully expect that. But, like,
I
yeah.
don't know that Saban coaches for that long. He's looking old.
Yeah, but he's already almost been there for 20 years.
I don't know.
I think
he retires. That's the other thing. How many is he going to win before he just retires? He makes a ton of money.
I mean, he's the greatest college football coach of all time. I mean, and his contract is written, whoever is the highest, he becomes the highest automatically. Look, and they're definitely 17, 18. So 14 years. He's been there 14. He'll be going on 15. It'll be the biggest headline when he does retire. If
he doesn't retire in the next few years, then he's an idiot. Look, because you gotta do it like Bob Stoops did, except, maybe a better judge of character than Bob Stoops, where you leave while your reputation's intact. You don't want to be like Snyder, who had a bunch of mediocre Kansas State seasons before you finally step down or step away. Like, you want to gracefully give away control while your reputation's at its height.
Well, and also too, Nick Saban's already surpassed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If he ties, I mean, he'll tie Bear Bryant in this next one. If he wins, I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, he'll surpass Bear Bryant if he wins tomorrow night, he'll surpass him. I would say at that point, unless he's going for like the record, which I think he has the record at this point with it. Yeah, I would say end on a high note, but the quality of his product has not decreased at this point. I mean, that's kind of the end game with it. No one has caught up to him.
Maybe he's like real invested in being the coach of the first school to get to 1,000 wins. That's going to come up here in a few seasons. So maybe he coaches through that, and that's a good time to step away. Like, got Bama's 1,000th win, first school to do it. I'm out.
Yeah. I mean, that could be an option for it. I mean, I wouldn't see any reason why. I'm actually curious as you're saying it. Like, already, Nick Saban already has the most. Like, it's not even close. He's already has just in general with it. So he already has that record.
Like the new GOAT for college football. Like, no other college football coach has had the kind of success that he has had over the tenure.
Absolutely. Alabama right now, not counting tomorrow, has 942 wins. So
they're right at the
54.
I think they're in like third place right now. I think Michigan
second.
More.
They're in second. Yeah, Michigan's at 976. I'm 66, 78, 90. It would take him at least 5 more seasons to get over 1,000. Minimum for it. That's not including tomorrow night or including some of the bowl wins and things like that. At least 5 seasons for it. Right now, it's Michigan at 976, Alabama at 942, Ohio State at 941, Notre Dame at 929, OU at number 5 at 928, and Texas at 928. Now, Texas is graded 6th because they've played more games and they've lost more. Their percentage is much lower than OU's for it. So that's why, even though they're tied with it. So, and OU is also, if they win and Notre Dame starts losing out, they'll pass Notre Dame because Notre Dame's at 929.
USC is supposed to be higher too, but they have all those vacated wins.
Yeah, well, where is SoCal? Like, they're not even, they're number 13. Yeah, they would be what, above?
I think they would be at like 10. I think they'd be at like 6th if they counted all their vacated wins.
They'd be only at Southern Cal right now is only at 13. They would maybe be at number 10 with it. Penn State's still above them by a good 50. Southern Cal right now has 852.
852.
Yeah, and in these notes it says there's only 14 that have actually been vacated. So if you put those 14 into account, 62, they'd just be number 11 They're actually below. So that's actually surprising. Here's actually the next ones, Chad, is number 7's Yale, which no one should be surprised at because they had all that success like in the 1910s. 8's Nebraska.
The 1910s.
They count it, but they're the forerunners of the college football world. But
before the forward pass.
You know your program's in trouble if you can't complete the forward pass and actually make it over the line of scrimmage. Number 8's Nebraska, number 9's Penn State, and then number 10's Harvard. So that's kind of the top 10 rounded out at that point. But we'll see. I'm in agreement with you. I'm ready for Nick Saban to move on. I have a video plan kind of. I'm going with yes and no on it, but I have a video planned about has Nick Saban ruined college football, which is actually kind of a good segue into our topic tonight. So we were going to wait, guys, until Wednesday to kind of just recap the entire 2021 season, the highs, the lows, the highlights, the awards, kind of everything for that. But over the past week, we've kind of had just controversy. Well, not controversy, but just shenanigans. And it all involves Caleb Williams and the transfer portal and the NIL. So for those of y'all that haven't really followed the transfer portal or the NIL, and kind of how we got to this point. Let me lay it down for all y'all. For those of y'all who weren't aware, like early on in college football and athletics in general, there has been a lot of push to give the athletes more accessibility to money, to resources, and everything like that. There's a famous quote, I believe, from Barry Switzer, for example, back when he coached Billy Sims, that he would hire Billy and pay him extravagant amounts of money to babysit his kid for like an hour because they didn't make enough. Barry Switzer was always a proponent of getting the players more to that. So this started to get to the height of everything when we saw how much money like EA Sports was making. And mind you, I'm nutshelling everything, guys, so bear with me. How much EA Sports was making with their games, how much these universities were making with such and such as number on their back. And we all knew who the number was. It just didn't say the name on it. Well, a lot of the players went kind of enough is enough that they wanted to make the money for it, as well as not being stuck at places where, you got hired by, say, or did your NLI for a certain coach only for them to bounce like 6 months later for it, and then you're stuck at that school for a year. So first up came the transfer portal for that reason, to give those players a little more autonomy and a little bit more ownership of where they can go, basically the sit out one time or the transfer free rule, essentially, to let them go anywhere they want without having to sit out at that point. The intent for the transfer portal was like for grad students that didn't see anything, for walk-ons, for injury, anything along those lines with it. It was supposed to be more special circumstances. However, this has all turned into free agency of, I just don't like where I'm going. This isn't going to work anymore. I'm just going to go transfer wherever for it. And that kind of defeated the entire purpose, because now coaches are having to basically re-recruit their players every single year at this point with it, even though these guys have been around for a while with it. And then that kind of have led to the NIL, which is the name, image, likeness. The intent of the name, image, likeness was for these guys to basically do side hustles, go do a commercial, sign autographs, do certain things, like run their YouTube, like let them do their cash on the sides without it being against NCAA rules, essentially. However, it has been, after this first year for it, has been absolutely abused, because we're seeing people sign blank checks. We're having bidding wars on schools to get certain players there now. We're also having things like schools doing like a complete bonus for like players, like here's $50,000 to your entire O-line to keep them together. Just insane amounts of money just being tossed around like nobody's business. So what we kind of got to here with Caleb Williams. With Caleb, again, as a reminder, was a 5-star number 1 quarterback coming out of his class. Well, he wanted to come play for Lincoln Riley. When Riley packed up and went out west, everyone, including myself, was, okay, let's make it to the end of the season, but is Caleb going to possibly stick around? We don't know on that. We never really had an idea if Caleb was going to hang around, if anybody was, or if he was going to do that. We don't really know the feelings. We heard rumors like his family was upset with Lincoln Riley, but we never had anything that actually showed like any concrete evidence of it. Well, now on Monday, he officially announced that he is going into the Transfer Portal with it, and he is officially there as well. And he's using it to speak to other schools at this point to look at other options for if they are available. His dad used the reasoning of they want to make sure his NFL prospect is still bright and everything was good in the future, and using basically consistency with the coaching staff, but also being that all their options are open at this point, that they're not going to be settled on one school or anything. That being all said, it's pretty obvious that it's not for that reason, because OU is a NFL machine. They get players into the NFL. They have some of the most top coaching staff, especially switching from with Venables, and he's still bringing in Jeff Levy. Whether you like him or not, they're still bringing one of the highest paid offensive coordinators at OU at this point. It's all for who can pay me the most at this point with it. And we don't know what deals and stuff are going behind the scenes. We don't know like what all is being said, but it's starting to turn out that they're trying to get a lot more, it sounds like, than what is viable. And the reasonings keep going further and further away at this point. That all said, Chad, what's your initial reaction with NIL, the transfer portal, Caleb Williams' entire fiasco at this point? Because it's a lot to take in for it, and that this is kind of the reality of college football, as well as, I know I'm throwing a lot of questions at you, but I'm bringing up other stuff as you speak, but what would you do to the NIL and the transfer portal?
What would I do with NIL and the transfer portal? That's really difficult. Like you said, there were a lot of areas where the previous rules were needlessly oppressive to college athletes. They should be able to run a YouTube channel. They should be able to do a commercial, or sign an autograph, or sell their shoes, or whatever they want to do, like any other student that's high profile should be allowed to do, right?
Correct.
They're not being paid for their time. People can throw out a $60,000 scholarship. That's 4 years of their life. $15,000 a year is not a salary. Like, scholarships are not the same as getting paid or being an employee.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for those guys who have the opportunity to monetize their career, their football career, I, for one, think that it's good that we created an avenue for them to do that. The problem is that it's not going to be, your offensive lineman is also a TikTok star and is now allowed to collect money from TikTok. It's that your quarterback is being paid professional athlete money to compete in an amateur athlete league.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're all kidding ourselves if we think that all these NIL deals are just because they think that quarterback's going to bring in that much additional revenue to their business. Some of these are straight up homers that want to better their football team and now have a new path to do so. They don't have to stick cash in a McDonald's bag anymore. They can just stick them in front of a McDonald's sign.
And that's something to add to that. And it's not like this hasn't happened for many years now. It's just more out in the open and very blatant. Like, I'm sorry, guys, if anybody thinks that has not happened, y'all are kidding yourselves on it. Like, there's a reason why you sometimes see players with those new cars. Like, it happens. It is what it is with it. And it's just however the workaround for it. So it's just out there. So anyway.
So I want to be completely clear when, like whatever I'm discussing this, there's got to be a lot of criticism because the system is not, there's not easy solutions for it. But the answer is not to criticize I'm going to call them kids, but they're 18, they're adults, who are making some money off of it. Caleb Williams is an ACL snap or a shoulder pop from having no more career. There's a lot of incentive in place for them to monetize their product and monetize it now, not to wait till they go to the NFL. Some of these guys don't have NFL prospects. If they can't make some money off their football career, then all they got is a college degree that may or may not be worth something, depending on how good of a student they are. And so it's a fine line between I want to be able to for kids to get their due, and I also don't want it to ruin the sport to the point that there's nothing left for anybody to get, right? So you want people to have a slice of the pie, but you also want there to be a pie left when everybody's done.
Right.
As for the transfer portal, I really think the rules need to change to change the date that the transfer portal's open. I think that the rules need to change about when signing periods are. I think that the current structure is encouraging coaches to leave earlier, players to leave before the bowl games. I do think they need to restructure the bowl system in order to encourage players to stick around with their teams till the end of bowl season. But I don't know the answers. I just know that it's not a fun product for the entirety of the fan base when all this is going on.
Correct. And I want to say, if Caleb truly wants to go anywhere he wants to, like, I want to thank him for everything he did for OU. To me, he did the right route. I don't like the reasoning of, oh, I want to focus on my NFL career when it's really you're bidding for money. But it's after season he fulfilled, to me, his obligation to the university at the end. And I think you almost have to go take 3 chunks out of it. The first chunk is anybody who thinks it's not, it really is. This is really just minor league football at this point. To me, if they're going to do that, then either fully embrace it and say this is minor league, and the reason why they don't want to is because they don't want to make the students employees of the university. Excuse me. But also the otherwise, if you really want to still make it amateur, I guess if we're even at that point anymore, make a college of athletics at this point, and instead of like just keeping them eligible for how much ever it is, just have something in place where it's like, yes, they earn a degree in athletics, which would open up to, say, radio broadcasting after the fact, business contracts, things that would actually teach them going into the NFL rather than these things that aren't going to serve them, such as like the general education stuff that I've seen a lot of just to keep them eligible and not actually like advance their careers or anything like that. I think that's something people need to take into consideration with that. That's one chunk. Another chunk, I think, is, and you have to look at them both ways, where the transfer portal and the NIL are both the problem. They're both broken at this point, and you have to figure something out with it. If you asked me, and I want your thoughts, Chad, I think the transfer portal is the one that's more of the problem right now, because if you take a look at the NIL is broken because you're just throwing money around. And realistically, you could cap that. If you can figure out a way, and I know these universities don't want to do it, if you can establish a players union similar to the NFL, you can level the playing field a little bit and say you can only accept X amount of money from a sponsor per year, and maybe even max it out. Or if you go over, you have to start handing your scholarship back, like certain amounts. I don't know how that would look, but they can easily cap that money with it. Now, the flip side of it is the transfer portal. The transfer portal, to me, is the problem, because you can have kids transfer left and right at this point. There's no amount. There's no break for the coaches. They're able to pretty much leave whenever they want to at this point, and they can stick around in there any much. So it becomes recruiting the same players over and over, unless you're talking like legacy players or legacy families or people who just want to really be there for it at this point. What do you think is the problem, though? Do you think NIL is the problem? Do you think transfer portal is the problem? Or is there something we haven't even talked about that's the problem with it, outside of the kids wanting to make money? Like, I can't blame a kid who wants to make money.
Right. Like, I don't blame the kid that wants to make money. I think if you want to point to a problem, it's ESPN, right? Like, they dumped a bunch of money into a system that was not supposed to be about the money.
Correct.
And schools gobbled it up because they needed to fund these programs that are expensive,
Mm-hmm.
And so, media rights, it's about the money. I think in a perfect world, I don't know, you'd have like an NIL pot, maybe, like all the NIL money would go into a pot and all players would get a piece of the pot.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's kind of
You see the same problem I do.
it's kind of hard to do, right? Like, your third string quarterback at North Carolina is going to get, the same share as Caleb Williams, who actually brought in the money. So that's not
Right.
going to work. Like, you can't just do that. You can't just go full communist on it. Um, but you also want it to be like Caleb Williams. He's going to get tons of NIL money, right? And he should. Like, he's a dynamic player. He says what he needs to in front of the media. Like, people are going to want him to represent their brand. Okay. But Caleb Williams only has that platform because there is an entire structure of college football underneath him, right? So
Correct.
Caleb Williams can be at the pinnacle, the top prospect, but that third string quarterback at North Carolina State also plays a part in making the whole college football system run. And when you have a bunch of people at the top reaping all the profit from all the people at the bottom who actually make the league fun to watch, I mean, that just feels icky. It just doesn't make you want to watch the sport anymore. And I hate that. I hate to be the guy that's like, oh, you pay the players, you ruin the game. But there are a lot of guys like me who aren't particularly fans of the NFL. That the money gets to guys' heads. They don't play. They don't seem to play as hard. They're not there for the love of the game. You can list cliche after cliche, but the product in the NFL just is not as fun as and engaging to me as college football is. And I think a lot of it's because college football has its roots in this amateur sport where people want to go play for these colleges. They want to go and play the game that they love to play, and to go out there and have some bragging rights. And I think that's more fun than a bunch of guys playing for money. And
But
so,
is it really about you? You're closer to being a former athlete than me at every point in life at this point. But can you blame the kids though who are also saying like, "Hey, we did this in high school, so we could. This is basically a job for us. We could care less about the bragging rights because we want to just advances to get ready for the NFL." Can you blame
right. And
kids who want to
so
think like that too?
that's what I'm saying is that if you want a league where you get paid, where you're not just doing it because you want to play, well, there's a term for that. That's professional sports, right?
Correct.
The issue is that the NFL doesn't take guys until they're 21 after the third year of high school, right?
Right.
And so you have this gap where they have to keep playing, and the NFL doesn't offer any other alternative than to go to college to keep playing so that you can get drafted. And so you're right, it has become the minor leagues. And I don't want college football to be in the minor leagues. I want college football to be the amateur league. If they want the NIL deal, if they want all this extra money, I feel like they have to go and form a professional minor league where all that money can come in. Or they need to restructure the whole thing, like you said, where there's like a players union and somebody working out some kind of profit sharing agreement, where a portion of the NIL funds go to every kid, because there's a whole structure there, and those guys aren't going to get paid, even though they're just as important to the sport and making the sport great as the top quarterback at the top program.
Right, and that also, I mean, you and I both went to the same university for it. Well, here, let me back up. Here's two questions for you. Again, you are a much closer athlete than I will ever dream of being. So let's assume you're a D1 player, whether it's at OU, whether it's at a mid-major, or even like a D2. Do you think that would cause division in the locker room that you have a guy who's making $1 million off of an NIL deal, and then you've got like maybe $1,000 deal? Do you think that would cause some division of like, I get it, but at the same time, like we're all here to play the game for it? Like, do you think any of that exists, if anything at all?
I mean, you better believe that there are going to be some guys who, find out how much somebody's making and watch that kid a lot closer to see how hard he's playing in practice. Is he making it to the line? Is he jogging instead of sprinting?
Mm-hmm.
Is he taking his drills seriously? And even the perception that that's not happening can start to cause locker room breakdowns, even without the money. And then you add in the fact that, Caleb Williams might make, several $1 million next year. If his teammates think he's not putting in the work, that might cause some breakdowns. That being said, for all accounts, Caleb Williams is a guy that the locker room likes. So I don't know. And I'm just picking on Caleb Williams because he's the guy that we know because, we're OU fans.
Right.
But, I think that Spencer Rattler probably had some of the same problem. I know he had some of the same problem with the fans. The fans said, look, if you want to take all this NIL money, don't be surprised when I start treating you like a professional athlete. And, some of the more toxic fan base said, well, the gloves are coming off. I'm going to go and come after you like I would a quarterback on NFL Sunday. I didn't think that was right then, but there's a segment of the population that's going to be a thing. So anyways, the NIL, some of it's probably going to work itself out. I think there's going to be a flood of money over the next few years. Some of these people who got real excited to be able to spend money legally and not have to risk going to jail or getting their school sanctioned are going to pump out a lot of money that they've been, holding back in their excitement. And then I think that some people are going to get burned, like Canes was burned a little bit with their Spencer Rattler deal.
And I don't even blame
that
Canes
money's
for
going to
that.
dry up a little bit.
And I think
the money's going to dry up.
I think with Rattler, it was because Lincoln already had his foot out the door in early September. But you're not wrong.
I think Rattler's a great quarterback.
He has a better arm than Caleb does. I mean,
I think he's a bad quarterback for the system that we're in. I've said that since the beginning of the year. Is that Lincoln Riley did not give him the pocket protection he needed. Lincoln Riley did not give him the scheme that he needed. And we had receivers that weren't open. I was screaming at the TV with everybody else, quit throwing in triple coverage. But the fact of the matter is, when you only have to rush, 3 guys, it's hard to find receivers that aren't in triple coverage.
Yeah.
And sometimes ESPN or ABC or Fox or whatever don't show you what it looks like downfield. So you're just screaming, why'd you throw into triple coverage? And you don't see the fact that every receiver was covered and he's just trying to make a play,
Correct.
And so, but fans came after him, and I think he's going to be a great quarterback. I think he's going to be successful wherever he goes. If he can get his head on straight. I don't know about his off the field issues.
Correct.
And, but again, the transfer portal is for guys like Spencer Rattler, right? Who, got benched, got, they're not starting. They lost their spot. They need to go be able to play in order to, salvage their career. Like Spencer Rattler transferring, I wish him the best, right? And even to some extent, Caleb Williams transferring, I wish him the best. I can't blame him if he doesn't want to play with the coaches that we brought in. He wants to go find a different coach. Like, that's fine. Again, amateur athletics. You gotta be willing to let kids do that. But by the same measure, I don't think the transfer portal was intended for quarterbacks at top 10 programs to leave, to go to other schools. I think it was intended for, the kid who went to a crowded quarterback room and got benched and really, I think it's Baker Mayfield really brought this change about because of all the fight that he had to do to get his year of eligibility back.
For walk on and all that. Yeah.
Yeah. So really, the transfer portal is a Baker Mayfield watershed moment, people have been talking about it for a long time, but Baker Mayfield situation really pushed it over the edge. And so, kids like that, kids who didn't get a scholarship, got cut, kids who maybe had some problems at school, kids who needed a different academic program. They shouldn't have had to get releases to play for a different school if they're going to grad school. That's dumb. They're student athletes, not athlete students, and so but this idea that like every kid should just be able to transfer, no questions asked all the time, that does make that's a lot more difficult of a pill to swallow.
Yeah, and I thought about it a little bit. I want to answer Cinnamonson's, the name's awesome, question of where they could, in theory, put a cap on it, or they could. It's how you write your contract. Like at some point, I will not be surprised if we get a player like a players union in the sense of for the college football stuff for them to barter on stuff. But I also believe that would also say like it would be kind of like how they do the bowls at this point where such and such does a payout and now it all goes to all of them for it. Or they make it certain categories where it's like, okay, if you make over X amount, you got to throw that into the pot. Or if it's not qualified in this certain particular area, you have to throw it into the pot. I could see them doing that to level the playing field a bit for players that will never see that type of money for that, as well as being able to do certain things like certain type of contracts or anything like Caleb. Caleb, just using him as the example again, he's earned his money for it. For like if they, the rumors came out like 500,000 to 1 million for Caleb from the university itself with it. They're basically doing everything they can to not hit that employee type of thing, as well as going all the way up to that like gray line, that little line that's very, very, very like almost right there. They want to get scooted up as much as they can for that, but it's also to at the same time I could see them being able to do that with it because they're all part of the system with it. And you also have to keep in mind Title IX stuff and everything as well because of how football affects the other sports as well. I could see them figuring that out immediately for it. That's just me for that, though. There is ways what that answer would look like, though. I don't know. For the NFL makes it work out.
Let me piggyback on that. So the scenario that I'm talking about is called a profit sharing agreement. And you might not realize it just looking at college football on a Saturday, but profit sharing agreements are an integral part of college football because they're an integral part of the conference system that we have in college athletics. So all of the schools have a profit sharing agreement, right? They all get a media rights buyout. They all sign a contract and they split money between them. And schools like OU and Texas that bring in more value to a media contract distribute, some of that value to schools that bring less value to that media contract. But the reason for that is that OU and Texas need the smaller value schools in order to put together an entire package. So the idea is that there's no Big 12 without Texas Tech, TCU, Kansas, Kansas State, Iowa State, yada yada yada.
You need the other schools to make up some of the
slack. That's the framework I'm talking about. The third string quarter at North Carolina State, like he's part of the package of college football that's generated this deal for the top echelon players, right? They've created value in the sport that is now being monetized by the top 1 or 0.1% really. And the question is, how do you evaluate the bottom of that structure when the top is the one that's going to get all the attention? And that's a profit sharing agreement. And the only way to do it is by having a players union who organizes the profit sharing agreement, who negotiates it, who administers it, who makes sure that it's working properly and in a healthy way. Now, I don't think college football is ever going to get there because we don't live in a perfect world. But, if I was going to implement a solution to NIL, that would probably be it.
Well, here's something, Chad, and this is let's start with the transfer portal. How would you fix the transfer portal? I've had some thoughts on it. The first one, and I think there should be some very obvious ones that it's kind of free reign. Like if you're going to be a walk-on and you're not going to accept scholarship, you should be able to go wherever you want to. The transfer portal is your friend for that. If you have an injury, I think that's very, very big for that. If your coach gets up and leaves, your head coach, regardless of your assistants, all players should be able to transfer wherever they want to, as long as it's not at the same school. I do think you have to minimize some of that tampering with that point. But my thought was Why not make it where outside barring all that and special circumstances? So, like, say a player's mom or dad is dying and they want to transfer to the school, like, say, another school just to be closer to them, regardless of if it's D1, D2, D3 for it, and they prove it, yeah, full reign for it. That's what the transfer portal's for. But if you want to say transfer and graduate students, to me, graduate students have fulfilled their contract of what the university is offering their scholarship. They fulfilled it to the end of it. They got their degree. That's what it's for. But for the other players, in my opinion, I think you have to be either say like a redshirt sophomore or a junior to be able to access the portal at that point, to be able to go to any place. If you access it any earlier, not only do you give up having to like basically do the free transfer, the one timer, but you have to sit out a year as well, regardless of where you go. I think that's kind of how you rein the transfer portal in, because a lot of it we're seeing is definitely, it's all over the place. Okay. But I think you're seeing anyone where it's like, oh, I'm not going to win here, I'm not going to get my spot. That's still part of the game. You have to realize, like, yeah, then you're either not putting the work in, stuff has happened, whatever. But that is still part of the game, that you may not be the first string, you may not be the second string for it, or even the third string. But that's your prerogative to learn at least the first 2 years before you can transfer out. Now, that could open up another can of worms entirely, I realize. But that is a way to reel it in and really discourage players from just using it as free agency for that. What about you, Chad, and Chad as well? What how would y'all reel in the transfer portal? Because again, the transfer portal is the thing that's the problem right now. If we're comparing NIL and transfer portal is the single thing, and I cannot stress that enough with it, because how much of a disadvantage it puts the coaches in at that point with it. Because power has, to get an idea, guys, too, the power has swung back and forth. Power was with the NCAA, and then when OU and Georgia sued for TV rights, it went straight back to the schools at that point, and the NCAA basically became a enforcement agency, which is why it moves so slow on everything at that point, for better or for worse with it. I have my problems with the NCAA, but that is what it is. And then when you move to this stuff, when all the coaches and stuff started making millions of dollars, you saw how much they put the players at disadvantage. Now that pendulum has completely swung to the players having too much agency and leaving the coaches pretty much out to dry. You have to find the sweet middle for it. And to me, that kind of helps that. So how would you personally fix and I forgot, you have to, with the transfer portal, I would also say you need a limited amount of time you can enter and leave at that point with it. So like, I would say, and I don't know how you would do it for coaches, but I would say like August 1st to 3 days after the national championship-ish, maybe a first week, you cannot transfer. Like, you all have to be there together, and then open it up, say like middle of January to March, and then maybe something from like July to August to give you two options for it, but then you're stuck at that point. You have to make your decision, because the coaches also have to know who's going to be on the team. That's how I see it. What do you think, Chad? What do you think concerning the transfer portal?
So, just looking at the chat too. Look, guys. At the end of the day, these kids don't owe me anything. That's what I'm going to keep going back to. Is these kids don't owe me anything. So they don't owe me, 4 years of playing at my college. They don't owe me a product on Saturday. Like we're it's business at this point. Let's just acknowledge it. It's business. Now you can sign a contract with an employer saying that you're going to be there. Your employer can put in penalties for leaving. You got to pay back bonuses or something like that. Maybe you can justify something like that. But I keep thinking about the music industry, and you have these young artists who really need their big break, right? So they haven't been discovered. They meet their first recording studio and publisher, and they sign a crappy deal. Okay, and then they're stuck in this contract and they can't get out. And so they have to make so many albums, and they don't own the rights to their own music, and their lives are controlled by this studio. And it's this really toxic power imbalance between the person generating the value and the content and the person that's holding the keys to the gate to get into this high value field. And I don't think college football should be that. I really think, again, college football should be amateur sports. It should
Mm-hmm.
be, you go where you want to play. You play for who you want to play as long as you want to be there. And if you don't want to play anymore, you don't want to play anymore. Like you don't have to play. And I think that it's important to remember that these kids are signing these intent letters when they're 17, 18 years old, hopefully with advice from good parents. But let's just be honest, not every kid who plays college football has parents who know how to read a contract or
Yeah.
understand what their kid's signing up for
And
or
they're
went to
17 years
college
old. And
and
they're
they're
17 years
18
old.
years old and all they know is that if they go and they play D1 sports, there's a chance that they might get out of whatever situation they're in. They might better their life. And those kids, like, it's very easy to take advantage of a kid like that, and to really suck them into a bad deal and lock them in to a 4-year commitment. So let's say, um, let's take Maryland, for example. So a few
Mm-hmm.
years ago, Maryland had a coach who was so hard on his players and who did not listen to his medical staff and ran a player until that player died. Had a player die on the practice field, avoidable death, shouldn't have happened. The warning signs were there. They should have known he was dehydrated. They should have seen it coming, and he died. Now he had some pre-existing conditions, but they should have. The point is, they should have been better. Okay, so if we're gonna take away the transfer portal, you're telling me we're going back to a situation where if a kid's caught in an abusive coaching situation, he can't just transfer out and leave.
Mm-hmm.
If a kid is in a bad situation, not related to football, he doesn't want to disclose that to anybody. He can't just get out and leave. Dude got caught up in some gang activity and just wants to get out of the area to get away from the gang activity. He should have to disclose that so that he has a reason to leave the school he's at. Um, I don't want to shackle people to a place. I think it's very close to indentured servitude, and I don't want to use the slave word, but they're not
Nah.
slaves. They're not slaves. They have a right to leave. And so I want them to be able to transfer freely, but Josh, you're saying that you think the transfer portal is the problem. I disagree. I think the transfer portal was a good solution for what the situation was before, and it didn't really become a problem until you added the money to it. And then once you added the money, I think that's when it really became a problem.
Both of them together are the problem with it.
Right,
When you take
right.
both
One or
out,
the
when
other.
they're looked at separately, sure. But now I will say before I give some of my reasonings and stuff, I am opening the room up like I always do every 45 minutes, guys. So there is the link below. I will add you to the room if you want to join us. Again, webcam is not necessary, but we do request have like a headset or earpiece, just kind of to minimize the background noise and everything for us because we hear everything. It's like for all you Halo players, when you have someone who leaves the mic on, we don't want that. So the big thing though is both of them together is the problem. With both of them being abused is the problem. But the big thing is with the transfer portal. That's also though to also create a level playing field. It's also meant where you're not doing this yearly. That's why they have contracts though in the NFL, the NBA, wherever you want, whatever team-based game for it. You're going to be here a certain amount of things because that's while that is part of the game, that also makes it a level playing field for everybody, regardless of who it is. And it also it's like everybody wants to play the game. Of course, you're going to need that, and it's not moving all the powerhouse like players or whatever to the same uh area at this point with it, just like we've seen with, if we all kind of want to be honest, I mean it's a little ridiculous to say, but it is kind of the truth. The Chicago Bulls were kind of the first super team, then you moved on to what uh the Lakers, and then you moved on to the Miami Heat at that point. It prevents those super teams for it while also still leaving the opportunities for some of the other players. That's how I see it with it. Like that's kind of your contract for that, and it makes it fair for the coach, so okay, I know what's coming back. I kind of know what players are transferring out. I also know kind of what team I can form as well. Because look at Kevin Durant. That's a good example of that here in Oklahoma. I think it was Presti. I can be wrong. I don't pay a lot of attention to basketball. I'll be upfront on that. But he built this entire team around Kevin Durant, and Kevin Durant left. Mind you, some of that is because they increased the cap for that, so Kevin Durant could go to Golden State for that and them have that super team for that. But that all being said, with that, it took everybody surprised and it kind of collapsed that team at that point with it. Now we can go talk about if administration was the problem, was Westbrook the problem, was there all these little pieces there? It's all part of that. But that all being said, having those contracts in place and having the transfer portal limited where it's not a complete wild west for it, that does also make the game work at that point. And it also stops like the big programs from like keeping away from all the little programs. It does make it a little bit as best as they can with it. I mean, there's things that's not going to stop, like boosters. I mean, I'm saying that as an OU fan. I'm saying that as an OU graduate. Like, yeah, we have much better resources than other teams. However, you do got to have some rules in place for it so you have some semblance of order at that point, though, with it. Now, the flip side of that is the NIL. To me, the NIL, yeah, it influences the transfer portal. But the NIL at the end of the day is just money. There are ways you can cap that and also limit the certain amounts that you can get. You can just say you only accept certain amount of X amount of money, whether it's like straight up cash, straight up items, straight up anything at that point for it. You can limit money. Money's a lot easier for that, and that kind of solves a lot of that. Now, what that looks like, I don't know. That's the big thing with it. I think when you combine that with the transfer portal, that's kind of again makes that a problem. But you could easily make different categories of like, all right, if it's something like a side gig, like autographs, YouTube, commercials, you can make of that as much of that as you want, but you can only make a certain amount per thing for it to make it fair for everybody at that point. So that way you're also not having like boosters or companies like writing a blank check at that point. But then say like bigger activities, like if it's a company sponsoring you, like Nike, or say like Top of the World or anything like that, or even the school with it, you can only accept so much from that at that point from it. And now, unless they say do like a stipulation, because it'd be so, keep in mind, bear with me, unless they have a stipulation or something where it's you give up your scholarship for it, it's so few times going to happen for it. But have things where it's like, if you want to accept these big contracts that are more than what your scholarship is, that's where you can accept as much as you want. But those cases are so rare. Even I'm thinking NIL, who would be the guys that would actually make that big amount of bucks? Baker Mayfield, maybe Tim Tebow, the Boz back in the 80s, like maybe Chris Winkie, maybe like Reggie Bush. Like there's only so few guys, and that's 5, but how many players have been in and out at that point? And that's just limited to football at that point. Then you have to think about the other sports, the NBAs, like maybe Trey Young, maybe I can't think of his name. That was in NBA. I can't think of it, but there's only a handful of people who made this like, I'm not going to accept my scholarship for it and then just go for that. That's how I say. I think the NIL is a lot easier to manage for it, but that's my opinion. How would you limit NIL, Chad, though? What do you think you would do with it versus, say, the transfer portal?
I mean, I think I would. I don't know. I definitely don't like the idea of schools like trying to put together packages for players.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it needs to be between the player and the place that's doing the NIL deal. I don't like this. I'm gonna get $50,000 for every lineman, and like negotiating that on the school level. And I don't.
Yeah.
And my understanding is that they're not supposed to be doing that, but it's
Well,
kind of
that's the abuse
happening,
part. They're not supposed to be. Yeah.
right? But when you're like $50,000 for every offensive lineman, that seems shady.
Mm-hmm.
And so I mean, I don't know. I don't know how I'd fix it. I just know that there's not an easy solution. It's a delicate balancing act between exploiting the players and preserving the integrity of the sport, so that there's still a sport to watch at the end. And so it just needs fixing. I think some of the problems can get fixed just by changing dates on signing periods. I think some of it actually needs to be restrictions on the coaches. I think the
Yeah.
idea that coaches leave their schools before bowl games is ridiculous. The idea of like not seeing your team through a bowl for should I take Alabama plus 4.5? I think Alabama's going to win by 10,
Ooh.
James, but don't ask me. I'm at the bottom of my fantasy league, so I'm probably wrong.
James, I don't know, man. Like, I
Best
could see it
answer.
because I could see that. Man, that's hard. That is really hard.
You should
Let me think on it.
short the stock market right now. I don't know. Like, find something else to gamble on if you don't know.
James, I'll give you my answer later in the live stream. For it right now, I mean, it's hard. If you're going plus 4.5, you're saying they're
Yeah,
not
that's a
going to
lot.
convert. That's
Georgia's good. Georgia's a good team. You never
but
know how that's
Alabama
going to go.
handled them. Yeah. So anyway, continue, Kat. Continue.
But like they need to restrict coaches from moving. They need to make sure that schools aren't actively negotiating for players. They need to change signing day. They need to get rid of or move the early signing day, so that coaches don't feel like they have to leave their old school as soon as the regular season ends. They need to they need to do a lot of stuff. They need to change the way we recruit kids. They need to. I mean, part of me wants to say schools shouldn't be negotiating directly for athletes, but the other part of me wants to say that they should do stuff like NFL cheerleaders do, because like the Dallas Cowboys don't really pay their cheerleaders; they get all their money from like their appearances, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you almost want the schools to be able to be like, yeah, pay us $5,000 and we'll bust out our offensive line and show up to your event or whatever, you know. But that's gonna quickly devolve into somebody's paying you $5 million just because they want to get around the system and bribe somebody. And so I think the reality is that whatever you do, whatever they figure out, however they manage to make it work, if you throw enough money at it, somebody will find a way to break it.
Well, exactly, and the entire purpose too. And I know we kind of briefly covered it, Chad, but I do want to say too with the transfer portal, the entire purpose of the portal too was to come back coaches who could just bounce wherever they want to at that point. In my opinion, if a coach, my thought on it with coaches is including the transfer portal with it. If a coach signs a contract with it, the NCAA should have a rule of like you have to see the season through to the very end with it. I absolutely agree that coaches should not be able to bounce during the middle of the season. Coaches, I hate saying it because I get the purpose of it because every other occupation in the world does it, but coaches should not be able to be fired until the end of the season as well with it. Like if they want to give them a heads up and be like, you're not going to be here till the end. I get that, I guess, because they may not put their entire stuff forward, but they could also say like you didn't with cause at that point, then you're not going to get paid. But it does stop the bouncing of the coaches with it. But I also see too with the schools, if they're going to offer NIL deals to say the students and stuff, they should be able to say, fine, you cannot transfer them at this point. If we're going to pay you out all this X amount for it, you are guaranteed, you are locked in. You can't go anywhere else at that point. And I think that's fair. Every other sporting event does it. I don't see why that would be exclusive to like football or
Something else I do want to mention. I know that we talk about football here, but these rules apply to other sports too. So the softball team, the basketball team, the gymnastics team, the wrestling team, and I don't know all the other crazy sports that we play. All of these have to are governed under the same basic rules. Like for NIL. And so, you can scrutinize all you want to, $50,000 for a linebacker, but there might one day be a backroom deal where somebody's bribing off somebody or paying their way for their own kid into college by giving a $25,000 NIL deal to I don't know, a twirler. Like,
Right.
so this is going to ripple through other college sports too. And like I said, if you got somebody with enough money to throw at it, they'll find a way to break it.
Right.
And the transfer portal, like, I think the best way to fix that is if you're accepting NIL money, you shouldn't be transferring.
Yeah, they could
Like
set
if you
that
and
limitation.
maybe you say if you accept more than, I don't know, 25 grand in NIL money, you have to apply for a waiver to transfer. Because at that point you're basically getting paid for your place there. I think
Correct,
that's fair.
and that's what we said is that them together is the
Right.
problem, because no matter what we say about the players getting paid what they should be, as well as the transfer portal, that's always a positive. Like, no matter what anybody
Right.
says, that's the positive. It's when you combine them I'll pay you X and now you don't have to sit out a year. That's the problem with
Yeah,
it.
the
And
bidding war is the problem.
correct.
Is Georgia going to put together a better package for Caleb Williams than OU could? Is USC going to do it? Is Notre Dame going to put together a better NIL package? That's the problem.
Yeah.
And so if you say if you accept a certain amount of money, you need to apply for a waiver to transfer, that cuts that out, right? Because most people aren't going to be willing to spend millions of dollars to bring in an 18-year-old kid who might not pan out. We know 5-star quarterbacks don't pan out all the time. And, you're not able to poach that kid that signed the $1 million Raising Cane's deal, right?
Right.
And I think that also solves the problem of, the kids who aren't getting that much money from their NIL deals are still have the freedom to transfer. And I think they need to shorten the transfer window. I think it needs to
I
be
do
like a
too.
2-week period in the spring. Maybe there needs to be like a 2-day window in the fall for those kids who want to like enroll in the spring. But most of it, like if you want to spend a lot of time shopping around for other colleges, like you're going to need to do that in the spring after the bowl season, like not the halfway through the year or before your conference championship game. Like those are
Right.
games you're expected to play. And I also think it's fair. Like, I mean, people are going to opt out to go to the NFL, and there's nothing you can do about that. But I also think it's fair to say that you might want to start restricting transfers for kids who opt out of their bowl games. Like, if you're
Well,
not going to
most
play
of
in your
them are
bowl,
opting out and they're going straight to the NFL, so they don't
right?
care
But
about
this
that.
year there were a lot of kids who opted out to transfer. We were out some players in our bowl game, not because they went to the NFL, but because they were transferring. And
Right, and that would be solved if they just said you can't enter the portal until like all of college football is over,
right,
so
you're
tomorrow
expected to
night.
stick with your team.
Yeah.
Because at that point, it's not just the schools that are losing money. The people who pay to put on those bowls, or at least their insurance companies, are losing a ton of money, and you ended up with a lot of canceled bowls, and you're hurting, other teams that want to play a bowl but now can't. Might be the first time that team's been bowl eligible in years, and then their bowl gets canceled. Like that's dirty, you know.
Right.
And so
Right.
I do think there's some movement that can be made there to improve the system, at least until it can be overhauled entirely. So
Well, and no matter what, if you're going to balance it for the players, you got to balance it for the coaches too. At that point, coaches should not be able to bounce whenever they want to.
I agree.
I
I agree.
I
Like
think
you
you got to
recruited
stick to
those
it in
kids
the
to
end.
that school, you have a duty to those kids to see them through the season that you recruited them for.
Correct.
Right?
And now that's a flip side of it too, Chad. If we're going to talk about the coaches and stuff too, that's kind of a problem too, because when you think about the coaches, the schools have been moved. Usually it would be till the end of the season. You get sacked, whatever it is with it. But now they want to get that next hot coach immediately with it. They're not going to even wait. They're just going to fire you, and they'll just wait it out. They don't care if they get like a 4-10 season, and a 4-8 season for it. They don't care. They want that coach right now with it. And in my opinion, that should be limited as well with it. Look
Yeah,
at
I
Riley.
do think I do think that there might be room for and a lot of this just needs to get taken care of in coaching contracts, and the universities need to input these clauses, but a no compete clause during the season. You're not gonna take calls. Your agent's not gonna take calls from other schools while our season's still alive. Well, you can say, once we're not bowl eligible anymore, you can start taking other calls if you want to. But like Lincoln Riley shouldn't be taking calls in September for a team
the
that
tampering
has
type of stuff. Yeah.
national championship implications. Like all of that should have been shut down until after the season. And I do think that there's room in the contracts to say we're not gonna, like there's gonna be a steep penalty if we find out that you were talking to another school before January whatever date,
Yeah.
whenever we're done, And I think that's important because you got to remember that this is a dangerous sport, and these kids need their coaching staff to be there and to be consistent and to be present, like
Right.
physically and mentally present, to help avoid injury and help develop them. So,
Right. I would
um,
say, well, and like we said too, at the end of the day, it needs more structure. No one's against the NIL and no one's against the transfer, but it needs a structure to make sure it's not the Wild West that it is right now. Because regardless of how people think of it, and I'm just using Nike just because that's the one that's kind of the thing, or Under Armour should not be able to go to like a quarterback in 8th grade and said, we're going to pay you right now to go to this school, and you're still 4 years off. We need to stop that. That's kind of the thing. We need to stop where coaches can bounce anywhere. And you got to have it fair for the coaches and stuff, where players should have a limited window where they want to go shop at, essentially, at that point, and then go from there with it. They really do need different type of stuff at that point with it. That's just my opinion.
well,
I
I
could
would
be
be
wrong.
very interested if some statistics nerd ran the numbers on injuries before and after coaching departures to see if injuries are more likely in schools that um, lose their coaches, that are running on interim coaches.
Correct.
Because OU was lucky to have Bob Stoops, a guy who knows how to run a football program, right? But some schools aren't. They're just running with like some graduate assistants and whatever dude they could find to fill in. And I gotta imagine that's hurting those players.
Yeah. And I think, too, when you really break it down as well, at the end of the day, everyone has to remember too our opinions about the transfer portal, our opinions about NIL, what the good stuff is, how to fix it. At the end of the day, everyone has to remember, as it is right now, college football is a huge business. The amateurism's kind of gone. Like, I think that's been gone for a while at this point. So you need to make it where it's like, we're going to accept that this is minor league, because that's kind of where we're at right now, you have to have a system in place for it to make it fair for everybody, both for the coaches, the administration, and the players for it. That's kind of where we're at that point with it. And they're going to be, it's just like the playoff. The easy answer for the playoff is a 12 or 16 man playoff, because that's not good for business, though. So we're going to do it somewhere else at this point with it. But
Well, I think the sticking point for the playoff at this point is that the Pac-12 wants an automatic bid to the playoff, and everybody else is like, nah, you don't get one.
well, yeah, and that's the thing. We talked about this, Chad, on earlier in the season at this point, where it's also too the Big Ten, the ACC, well, they're kind of a mole, and the Pac-12 want to make sure the SEC doesn't get 2 teams. And the problem is, though, is the SEC is in a Xanatos gambit, and they're going to win no matter what. If we keep it at 4, cool, we can still get 2 teams in, just like we've seen before. If we expand it to 8, 12, 16, cool, we're still getting more teams in anyway, regardless of what y'all is, because whether people accept it or not, that's the best conference right now, and adding 2 blue bloods to it is not going to change that. That's just going to enhance that value.
I think it's very likely, if it moves to 16 teams, that 4 SEC teams in a 16-team playoff will not be. It won't be
uncommon.
Surprising. It shouldn't be newsworthy. I'm sure ESPN will make a big deal about it every time because they love this SEC.
Yeah.
It's nauseating, but I'm
you're talking
glad
about
to be like
our
on the
future
side.
brethren, Chad, our future members.
I will never do the SEC chant.
I won't either.
I will never. The SEC fans are like, no, you'll do it. Everybody does it. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm not going to do it.
I'll say it gesture and tongue in cheek as I'm kidding saying it. I'm never going to say it because it's like my dad. All respect to my dad. And if he's watching this, all respect to you, my dude. But it's like my dad where he's like, I root for the Big 12 teams except when they're playing OU. I root for Oklahoma State except when they're playing OU. My dude, I root for one team and one team only. I don't care about the rest of the conference. Now, I in the larger picture, I do understand the conference succeeding helps everybody at that point because you're able to pull the recruits in. That's what we're seeing with the SEC. But no, I root for one school. One school.
That's fair. That's fair. Like, OU winning is the biggest thing. I did say, like, I'll root for Big 12 teams when they're not playing OU, but just in the sense that them winning increases the prestige of the conference, which increases OU's prestige, which is really what you're doing it for. But chanting SEC is like me saying, "Oh, look how good we are because Texas won a national championship." Like, I'm not chanting Big 12 as the Texas wins the national championship. I'm probably screaming at whoever, whatever demon allowed Texas to get to the national championship again. But and so, but it might be nice for the world's largest sports outlet to not come in with a obvious bias for another conference once we move to the SEC. But I do think it's very likely that if we move to 16 teams, that the SEC gets like 4 in more years than they don't, because the Pac-12 is probably only ever going to get 1 in. The Big Ten is probably only going to get like 2 in. Big 12 is probably good for 1 or 2. ACC is probably good for 1, maybe 2. And the Group of 5 is not going to fill out the other 8. And so
I think if it moves to 16, you'll have all conference champions in, and then you'll have 6 at large. Or if it's 16, 6 at larges. That's what will happen with it. Everybody will get 1.
But like, think about the Pac-12 this year. So the Pac-12 championship was useless this year. Neither of those teams were getting in. So let's say one of them had allowed a bid. The other 11 teams are already out, right? And the Big Ten, so Ohio State gets in, or Michigan gets in, and then what? Maybe you take Ohio State, maybe take like a Michigan State or something. So maybe you take 3 Big Ten teams. I don't know. And the ACC, I mean, you probably don't even want to take Wake Forest, but you do. And the Big 12, you take Baylor. You might take Oklahoma State.
What do you mean?
I'm just saying, like, for the at-large spot. Like, how many other conferences besides the SEC have multiple teams by the end of the year where you're like, oh yeah, for sure that's a lock for a spot? Whereas the SEC is going to say, is going to have, Alabama, Georgia. More often than not, they're going to have OU. Florida's probably going to bounce back at some point. Yeah, like, they're going to have multiple schools that are going to put together resumes that make people think, oh, they need an at-large spot.
Yeah. And keep in mind, guys, for everybody watching, keep in mind, you can root for one school, of course, but at the end of the day, people do want the conferences to be good because that payout is much better. It's a lot more money you get if you have 9 out of 10 Big 12 teams in a bowl game versus having 4. It benefits everybody because everybody throws the money in the pot and then it's distributed. That's the sole reason why you should be hoping your conference is successful for that. Not because, SEC or Big Ten. No, that's just the general stuff to improve your facilities and everything like that. That's just kind of how it works for that with it.
And it doesn't change
that you can. Yeah. It gives you the benefit of that. Look at Bama after they lost to A&M. They crap until like the end of the season. But that also too goes going back to like kind of the SEC with it as well, with all the recruits saying we saw literally last week, Bama dominated Cincinnati. There was no doubt about it. They just basically, they played with half the foot on the pedal at that point. They did not even play balls to the walls with it. They played very lackluster and just did not care with it. And Georgia destroyed Michigan. Michigan had no help from the moment they had the whistle blown. It shows there is a clear, true. We're part of it. We're part of the guys that have been annihilated by those teams as well. But there is still a big, huge talent mismatch, and that's part of it. You have that stuff. That's just, it is what it is with it. So I guess my big question for you, Chad, would be then, now that we talked about the NIL, now that we talked about the transfer portal, and people watching the stream, please throw your comments in. We'll address them as we go at this point as best as we can with it. Do you think Caleb did the right thing, or is there anything you're ticked off about Caleb? Is it just like, let him do his thing? Is there anything from that at this point with all the transfer portal, with all the NIL? What's your thoughts with Caleb?
I keep trying to think, if it were my kid, what advice would I be giving my kid? And if it were my kid and he was the most sought after 19-year-old quarterback and could potentially make several $1,000,000 where he is, or even several million more dollars where he might go, I mean, I think I would encourage him to examine his options and to consider carefully how much money he could make. Um, and that's tough because, as a fan, I want him to stay. As somebody who loves the sport, I think that, him leaving is not a good trend for the sport. But as a parent, um, I can't blame him. I can't blame the family for encouraging him to explore his options. I appreciate that he waited till after the bowl season, that he stayed with us through the bowl game. He could have said, nope, I'm going to opt out of the bowl game, just sit in the transfer portal and see what I get.
Yeah.
I think that's good. I think that, he's been, as far as what he's doing, I think he's doing it the most right way that he could have. So I'm not mad at him. I don't bear any ill will to him. Again, he's a kid who's, you know, finally able to monetize on a lifetime's worth of work. And I don't want to blame anybody for that. Somebody throwing millions of dollars at me, I'd probably take it too. But
now
on the other end, I think that OU's the best, most fun place to play college football, and so, it can sting a little bit when somebody's like, "I'm gonna go look for something better." It is interesting to me, Cinnamon, that his dad seems to be more active on Twitter than his son is. So maybe it's a family thing. I don't know what's up with that. I don't know what the dynamic is there. But I'm trying not to hate the kid because the dad's encouraging him to look out for the money, which I think is what's happening.
I agree with you. I have no problems with what Caleb did. I think Caleb had fulfilled his contract. If he wants to transfer, I'm only going to wish him the best. And I will outright say, guys, like, if I was offered money, I would take a look. I'd listen for it. Now, here's the flip side of it, though. Now, and I agree with you, Chad, that I don't agree with his reasoning. Just, I know why they're doing it, but just come out and say it. Just say, like, hey, look, I'm just looking for the highest bidder. Like, just say it. Don't dance around, because you're just making more enemies at that point. And especially if he does end up transferring to USC, like, that's just going to cause problems as well. Now, that all being said, this is where the only problem I would have with the Caleb one. Based on his reasoning, let me give you an analogy, Chad. If you were in the same position as Caleb, or your son was, or your daughter, and they're athletic positions, okay? OU, if you're trying to focus on whatever career, let's just go NFL just for what we're talking about for purposes and all that, if OU said, okay, we're going to offer you $500 to $1 million, and probably they can do a little bit more knowing booster, so maybe up to $1.5 million, but then Rutgers says, hey, we'll offer you $2 million to come here starting off. Do you think they have to take that into consideration of, okay, if I'm focused on the NFL, you also have to take into account the product you're going to put on the field with it? Because I would say at that point, if, say, comparing to Caleb, if he wanted to go to a NFL factory such as I can't argue a USC. We can't argue, Texas has had problems, but Texas still has that ability to do that, and Alabama. But then you have to question things like a Kansas State, a Rutgers.
I mean, if he's going to that historically black college, was it Jacksonville State or something?
Yeah.
Like, he's like dropping out of the D1 just because they're going to pay him several $1 million with Coach Prime or whatever. Like, like at that point, I'm gonna roll my eyes and say, okay, like go chase your money. But that's dumb, and you're being dumb.
Yeah.
If he went to like Ohio State, if he went to Michigan, any top 25 program, I'm gonna
Mhm.
say, okay, like if that's what you want to do, if that's what's best for you, like that's okay. If you're gonna
Yeah.
go to, I don't know,
Rutgers,
I'm
Kansas,
I'm just trying to think of like a really rich but school that can't have any success in football, but I can't think of
Kansas,
any. But yeah, let's say you
Kansas.
go to Kansas and you're just there and you're gonna get like rocked every game
Hey,
for the next 4 years.
I got a better one for you. I got one better for you, Chad. Texas A&M.
Yeah, you're gonna go to Texas A&M, which doesn't have a lot of history of getting a whole lot of people in the NFL. It's kind of culty. If you're an A&M fan and you're listening, you're weird.
Kind of is really loosely used here. I think you just say like, yeah, it's a cult.
I think. Well, if you go up and ask their fans, some of them will just straight up say that's a cult.
Yeah, they will. But those are the
Honestly,
same people.
this is like really off topic, but like when I first started getting into college football, I disliked Texas A&M much more than I disliked Texas. And that's kind of stuck with me. Like if I had to rank the two Texas schools on which ones like I would rather go and like hang out with their fans, I'd rather hang out with Texas fans than A&M fans.
That's going to be something we have to discuss at some point, Chad, on another
Like
live stream. Is the worst college football fans. Like A&M's on my list, but so's LSU and so's Texas Tech. Like, yeah, and now Kansas State. Kansas State I've added in now, but
I
there's some
mean
bad fan
Kansas.
bases.
I think what it was is I mean I ran into some like really rude ones, and then Sam Bradford got hurt my freshman year of college. This is like his last year, and I remember playing A&M later in the year, and I guess Landry Jones was the backup, right?
Mhm.
And there were like a bunch of signs in the stadium that they kept flipping to on the broadcast that were
Yeah,
basically making fun of Sam Bradford for being hurt. And
yeah.
it was just so distasteful. And I just have never really had any good interactions with A&M fans. And so if you're a nice A&M fan, like give me a call, let's chat. But
You're a shiny Pokemon,
I'm
apparently,
not
in
expecting
the
any phone
sea.
calls. So yeah, you as a rare breed. And then like Tennessee fans be like chucking stuff onto the field. Who does the tortillas? Is that Texas Tech? Are they the
That's
ones that throw
Taco
the
Tech.
tortilla?
Yeah, Taco Tech.
Just weird.
Yeah.
Just
But
weird.
the thing is, I always look at the different fan bases where it's like, there's the ones where it's like just the weird ones, but most of the fan base is fine. And then you get the things like the cult. Like Alabama, for example, is kind of it is what it is. They're the fan base. They're more of like us. They're entitled, but they're not bad. But then you get like the Texas A&M's, Oklahoma State. They have some questionable fans.
I mean, but like you
Um,
don't want to ref in Boston because they like come after you if you make a bad call, like
yeah,
death threats. So you
yeah.
don't want to. So like I feel like Texas A&M is like the Boston fans in college football.
God, they
Just
are.
real
They are.
crazy, real crazy. And apparently
They're
Tennessee, because
insane.
Tennessee like had a riot when what's his face left for USC, right?
Lane
Um,
Kiffin. Yeah.
when Lane Kiffin left them high and dry, they like were burning down buildings in Tennessee. So that's another crazy school. I'm not sure how I'm gonna feel about playing them. So
I mean, you need to accept though that we're also going to be playing the crazy, insane people like Georgia and all them as well. LSU at night, man, is going to be big. LSU
an
at night.
A&M cadet once drew a sword on an SMU cheerleader in the 80s.
Yeah.
Who dang?
Now here's a question for you too. Is also now here's the thing. You said Texas A&M. Mine is Baylor. Baylor is a cult too.
I mean,
It's weird, man. It's
keeping
weird.
in mind
Everyone
that
has.
like this is a league that literally has BYU in it. Like,
I don't know what you're
but
talking about. We're not in that league. We're leaving the league for another league.
but I mean like college football in general. But
That's true.
yeah, like a lot of these schools, some weirdos. Liberty University, that's a weird place.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
hmm
Well, you're also letting me know that because you also have the Old Dominion ties and everything like that.
I
too.
once,
So,
when I was in high school, I'd mentioned to my guidance counselor, I was like, they were asking where I wanted to go to school. I was like, I don't know, maybe like Liberty or something. And they said, oh, well, don't worry about your grades. Anybody with a pulse can get in there. Because it's a private
spicy.
Christian school.
Yeah,
They just be taking everybody. And that's when I
right.
was like, oh, okay, maybe I should actually look into where I want to go to school instead of just like applying to a random one.
And then you
So,
ended up. Now, I forgot. Did you transfer to OU or did you actually start at
no, I
OU?
started at OU. And
Uh-huh.
literally, like, two things that went into my decision to go to OU. One, I was watching a football game. This had to have been like 2007, 2008 Bedlam game. And
Yeah.
OU just stomped OSU. And it was like the first college football game I'd ever watched. I'd never really watched football, didn't really understand the rules, but OSU got stomped. And I was an OSU fan before that. Like I had an orange hoodie and everything. I wore to school even in high school because my family is like mostly OSU fans. And we were all
I,
wrestlers, and OSU is like the wrestling school.
it's okay.
But at that
Nobody
point,
should
I
be.
was like, oh, okay, so OSU's not great at football. And then if I went to OSU, I'd lived enough. My parents were moving close enough to campus that I wouldn't have to live in the dorms, and I didn't
Yeah.
want to live at home anymore. So I went to OU instead.
And then you realize how wonderful a choice that was.
Yeah,
Because then again, you wouldn't have met me, you wouldn't have met Patrick, and you wouldn't have met Daniel. Like,
yeah.
you wouldn't have met
Lucky
the
choices. Lucky
compadres. I
choices.
know, right? I know, right? Chad, we're reaching the 4-minute mark at this point before we wrap up. So, you got any final words on NIL, transfer portal, anything on your mind, OU stuff, or Bama, Georgia, anything left at that point?
Just don't let it stress you out. Don't tweet at recruits. Uh,
Don't tweet at recruits. I'm stressing that as well. Don't tweet at recruits or former players unless you're there to praise them. Like,
and frankly, don't tweet at Caleb Williams or his dad either. Like, just don't be
they're
that
gonna do
guy.
their own thing. Yeah, don't
Like,
be that person.
you can type in a boomer sooner or best of luck, but if you don't have anything nice to say, just tweet nothing at all.
Never tweet. Never tweet. Never tweet. Anything else? James, if you're still on, oh man, I don't know. Bama at +4. I don't think I'd take the +4. I would take the minus. I would think Bama's gonna cover the spread. I think they are, but that's me. If I had to pick with 3 minutes left on our live stream for it, I would pick the negative. But remember too, I told you wrong advice at the beginning of the season as well with it. So bet at your own at your own risk at that point. So that all being said, guys, I want to thank everybody for joining me. I know last week I said we were going to do the Wednesday live stream, but with all the Caleb Williams stuff, with all the NIL and transfer portal, this was a good opportunity to talk about it now versus another week from now when it may not be the topic of the week at that point. So again, I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. Chad, I want to thank you for joining me tonight for it. Everyone, again, comment, rate, subscribe, hit the notification bell because that will always give y'all the opportunity whenever we go live for y'all to hop in. Again, I also appreciate all the comments and everything that you throw in. I always do my best to read the chat while we do the live stream so that way I can respond to y'all because I enjoy interacting with the community. It's something fun, and this is just, I love football, and it's very, very fun. Even though the college football season is about to end, there's still more stuff to talk about for it. Again, we're going to have a special live stream this Wednesday, guys. We're going to have on, I think Sean's going to hop on this Wednesday, and we have some other guests to hear just to kind of talk about college football of the season. Again, the season ends tomorrow night with it, but we're going to kind of recap everything because it's been a very chaotic year. So again, Wednesday night, guys, same time as usual, the 8 o'clock Central Standard Time, and we're going to try to go for about an hour and a half. We may go 2 hours just because there's going to be more guests on or anything like that. So that all said, guys, again, join us next week, possibly, maybe as well. I know I'm going a little bit over. There's also, depending on what news and stuff come out from it at this point, we may take next week off with it. I have not decided yet. So just kind of watch to see if there's going to be a live stream or anything with it. Because now that we're in the off season, there is kind of some weird how we got topics or anything like that. I want to still do every Sunday, but if I'm missing something, that's going to be kind of hard to do. So just watch for it and everything. Otherwise, I'll see y'all here like in 2 weeks. So again, Chad, thank you for joining me tonight, bud. You always have great insight as well as just great conversationalists. I always enjoy having you on. Thanks everybody who attended the live stream tonight, and I hope to see y'all on Wednesday. So Boomer Sooner, only one Oklahoma, and
Texas
I
sucks.
accept that Bama is going to win tomorrow, and I hope I'm wrong, kind of, sort of, but I've accepted it. So everyone else, I hope you had a good weekend, and I'll see y'all Wednesday. Bye.